What are you at revenue-wise now? What's the threshold we've crossed? 40 million.
A million 40 in 2 years. We take some pride in coming out of nowhere and doing this. I'm a foreigner. Raphael is not an insider to the ecosystem. So doing this and then having a very big acceleration curve is the sign that we're getting something right. Sharing the mistakes, sharing the learnings, sharing everything, start to create this connection, even with decision makers that are running very large and complex and important operations. And then we started to see it was flywheel when it comes to talent, a flywheel when it comes to customers, distribution, and everything. This feels very awkward. You feel very awkward when you start doing it. That moment you described is when you feel the most awkward, and it's probably when it's the best conversation to be had. So when you mess it up, you need to be sure you don't filter it out and you're sharing something where you definitely messed up. And that's usually when the best messages come in, and a lot of those come in publicly, but there's a lot of private ones coming through that. So a lot of people reached out to us saying, hey, by the way, I went through the same situation you just described or something similar. Let's grab a coffee, let's get to know each other. And so that's probably the most difficult but the most productive moment when building in public really helps you. This has to be fun, and that makes it a lot more fun, even if it's a bit more painful in the beginning.
Hey guys, welcome. I'm glad we could make this work. Rafa, last time I saw you, we had lunch in San Francisco. So you're back in Sao Paulo, and I'm back up north a little bit here in wine country. Caetano, great to have you guys on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
See you again.
Look, guys, I think we should start just by giving the audience a little bit more clarity on what Barte is. You know, it's a fintech business in Brazil. Why don't you give me the quick one-liner, and then I want to go into a handful of things that I want to cover today with you guys.
Go on.
Great. Maybe I'll give the one-liner. So in very, very simple terms, Barte helps companies manage their cash all in one place. And so this means accepting payments, doing payments, seeing payments go through, and what they need to do. And so it's a full stack platform for companies to manage their cash flow or their working capital, which started on a very strong vertical on payments acceptance and has already evolved from that.
Great. So it's kind of like this control center for your company's cash flow then.
Exactly.
I like it. Cool. And things seem to be going well for you guys. I mean, I followed you guys. You guys kind of, in the last couple of years, you've gone from, $1 million to what are you at revenue-wise now? What's the threshold we've crossed? 40 million.
A million 40 in 2 years. We take some pride in coming out of nowhere and doing this. So I'm a foreigner. Raphael is not an insider to the ecosystem. And so doing this and then having a very big acceleration curve is the sign that we're getting something right. And so
awesome. Tell me a little bit more about the revenue breakdown. If you could just quick overview how those dollars enter your account, a little bit more clarity on the business model. And then I have some questions about how you're building it, because you're building it in kind of a unique way.
It's interesting because the business model is actually quite simple. So one thing it sounds kind of vague is, look, control center for your cash flow. This is what Barte does. But basically what we defined very early on was we only get paid in the success of our customers, whether this is in accepting payments, in moving money through. And so it's always the transactional model on top of the movements we have on our platform. This is diversified now. So, for example, if you're accepting a payment, you might have a take rate on that. If you do some sort of advance, you might have a fee on that. But now actually we started diversifying even more and understanding what do companies need to make their business tick and to make their business work. And this is a lot on how we build and also how we see Barte at scale. But one of the things we've been diversifying into is obviously what AI levers we have to pull. And so right now, roughly 10% of those revenues are connected directly to this. And they're more around someone who manages their cash flow. What actually are the bottlenecks you have for your business when you're selling, what should work and doesn't these days? And this can apply to infrastructure, like we started, but it can also apply to what flows you have around collections, around messaging, around being close to your customer, around upsell, around cross-sell. And so all of these things are things we're exploring because we have the ecosystem and the data around it. And so it's transactional, diversified across industries, across customers. There's no relevant concentration there. And now with a strong input from AI already and from AI initiatives we've been piloting this year.
I want to definitely ask about AI. Before we do that, I want to talk a little bit more about how you got started with your original ICP. Did you have a very focused niche customer that you started with? Most companies begin that way. Walk me through the early days. Let's go back to the 1, not the 40. I like to know how to get to the 40, and then we can talk about how to go to the 400. But tell me how you started.
Yeah, that's a great question, because we started with small business, and we were looking for verticals. In the end, we understood that this business is a horizontal business, and also that we should go up market. So we started to serve mid to large merchants, and in a certain moment, we closed the platform, at least for now, for small business. So basically now we just serve medium to large business. And it was a great shift at that moment in which we not only started to accelerate, but also to understand our like uh, our strategy and the product we should build.
Seems like, do you think it was the right strategy to start with small companies because it allowed you to get traction and learn from your customers, and then you could go to like higher value customers? Or if you start over again, would you have started with more mid-sized companies initially?
The base principle. So it's difficult to say where exactly we should have started or not. And if we're very pragmatic about it, we started where we could. So the first people that opened the door and that actually gave us a couple of minutes. I mean, you know how it goes from 0 to 1. It's more around, tell me about your flow. Let me sit down next to you and see what works and what doesn't and what I should focus on. And so we spent a lot of time iterating on this. And that's part of why now we're so sure. And eventually we were so sure of the bets we were making. The one thing we kept finding along the way, as Rafa mentioned, was we could move into larger customers, but we could also move deeper into the infrastructure. And so what the control center for cash would look like on day 0 was a lot hazier than it is now. And that sort of discovery comes from closeness. What we found out along the way was we have enough credibility to create that close relationship with larger and larger companies. And these are mid to large. And so maybe we could have started on larger customers. The one thing is, if we were starting on longer sales cycles and more structured processes, maybe the feedback loop wouldn't have been as fast. And that was definitely a key ingredient there. So yeah, difficult question to answer. Probably we could have started a bit more upstream, but not that much more.
Yeah, you start with whoever will work with you initially, and then you learn and you adapt. I mean, if you look at Brex, they started with small companies and they kind of said, okay, we're not serving them anymore. There's a lot of examples of that. And in order to get traction, start with what you can and then learn. I want to talk about this whole building in public because, I think that there's strong opinions, I think, of whether that's a good idea. And, seems to be working well for both of you guys at Barte because you guys are growing really fast. Talk to me a bit more about how you guys decided to build in public, why, and then what were some kind of the principles that you built on top of to execute this strategy?
We didn't start in the very beginning as some company does. We actually reached product market fit, and then we decided to share what was working and what was not working here. And it was a very spontaneous move in the beginning. We basically love to assemble brilliant people, very intense people, and we very pride about disseminating these point of view in which you should to think deeply about your work, about the best way to do something and to question the market and so. But it was great for credibility. We are the payments and banking partner of a large company, so we need to build credibility. It's not cheap, and we discovered that it was a cheaper way, even though it was vulnerable. So sharing the mistakes, sharing the learnings, sharing everything, start to create this connection, even with decision makers that are running very large and complex and important operations. And then we started to see it was a flywheel when it comes to talent, a flywheel when it comes to customers, distribution, and everything. So it was basically very organic, but it has been great.
I've heard you say something along the lines of before we were the best company at something, we were the worst one. It's a good summary of what, validation really looks like and, a testament to your building a public spirit. What were the worst days like? I mean, it kind of sucks when you're building a public and then something bad happens and then you have to it magnifies the problem, right? How do you think about that? How do you navigate building in public when things are just crappy?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the inputs and the things you share. So building in public is basically a way of spreading what we're doing and what we're finding along the way, and not as much on look how great Barte is. It's much more look, we've been looking into this. This is what we found out. Actually, if there's different opinions, we invite those in because those are ways for us to think more about what we're doing. And so the big difference is it kind of insulates you from the fluctuations of the company, which is a roller coaster, everyone knows. But then when things are not going well, your building in public trajectory is still a very personal way in which you share the journey, in which you share my journey as a founder, my journey as a leader of a company, as a leader of people, as dealing with customers. And that brings a lot of credibility. Now, the one thing to add to Rafa's point on this feels very awkward. You feel very awkward when you start doing it. That moment you describe is when you feel the most awkward, and it's probably when it's the best conversation to be had. So when you mess it up, you need to be sure you don't filter it out and you're sharing something where you definitely messed up. And that's usually when the best messages come in, and a lot of those come in publicly, but there's a lot of private ones coming through that. So a lot of people reached out to us saying, hey, by the way, I went through the same situation you just described or something similar. Let's grab a coffee. Let's get to know each other. And so that's probably the most difficult, but the most productive moment when building in public really helps you. Apart from the whole flywheel, which is obviously very useful on credibility and all of that, this has to be fun. And that makes it a lot more fun, even if it's a bit more painful at the beginning.
Yeah, you basically embrace the trade-off. You gotta be judged. We gotta be ashamed. We gonna be insecure. And as much as you keep doing that, you can see it's net positive, and you start to be more comfortable about that and to express this confident about what you're doing and what you you're not hidden anything, so I think that's the message it starts to create.
And just complementing on this, the really cool thing to see is when someone joins Barte and they've known us only outside in, and they're like, oh, you guys actually spoke in one way, and now when I met you guys, this was really you. This is not brand speak. This is not marketing. That's refreshing. And so whenever we hire someone, it's easier to onboard them because the culture is already very clear from day one, on the good sides and on the sides that might not fit with someone, like intensity and how driven we are for numbers, results, and everything we're doing here. But so the message is a lot clearer than what you would have in a normal process of bringing someone on.
Do you envision, do you guys share your product roadmap in public?
Yeah, not totally, because not always it's what people want to talk about and discuss, but it's not something we hidden.
Yeah, it seems like that could be a very effective way to, get customer input. And if you had, what your plans are, you can get, customers to give feedback on features that they want. And there's a founder in our last fellowship. They're not competitors at all because they're focused on a completely different market, but they do some payment stuff. But it's called Abacaxi Pay, and he has an indie hacker community of 11,000 people, and he literally just publishes stuff and then gets them. He said the hardest thing though is that how do you prioritize when you're building in public and you have like all these opinions? Do you just like, is it like a democratic system, or like you've obviously have to have input from the vision of the business and other things too? How do you guys manage what you build and customer feedback you're building in public fashion?
That's exactly the problem. Are we going to be democratic about it, or are we going to filter it out and understand who the most likely and most productive customer is for us? Probably the most interesting input there for our business is that a lot of our customers are actually not that present on LinkedIn. And so we need to balance out something else, which is the online presence and what's really relevant in terms of businesses for our own product roadmap. But basically, the way to think about it is any input is valid, any input is necessary, whether it comes from someone online, someone that uses the product, someone that's considering using the product, or some partner that's looking for some innovation on their own product, and Barte might be the perfect fit for that. It's on us and it's on our product team and on the two of us to understand, okay, what's relevant and what do we have the capacity to do right and to do very well now and contributes to the very long-term vision. So one thing we didn't discuss now, we discussed, okay, this went from 1 to 40 very quickly. The path to 100 is probably going to take one more year, but it's very clear that this can get to a couple billion in revenue. And so when you look at it in that way, it's much more relevant to think, how does this platform feeds into itself and becomes a full platform for a given customer versus point solutions, point features, which are interesting improvements, but most likely they'll be incremental ones versus doing something really, really big, which is what we're aiming for.
Yeah, but in other words, we're not masters on using the building public strategy to gather feedback. At the same time that we share our fascination about the process, and we start to see a lot of accidental outcomes, so for example, when we start to build our voice agents to recover payments, to do collections, it started to be something very curious to people that were not our ICP or were small companies that cannot use Barte nowadays. And many times they say, like, in 1 or 2 years, I can use Barte because I'm gonna be on the threshold, and so it's basically something that you don't need to be so intentional, because you basically building your brand and being authentic, and people just connect and contribute and participate.
And it helps with everything else. Now that you mentioned voice agents, there's a good story around that where Rafa's post on voice agents actually didn't help on product, it helped on the business cycle moving through. So we needed someone on the customer end to sign the contract with Barte. And that person was not the main point of contact in the negotiation. And it was taking a few days. Purely the attention span was not there. Suddenly there was a post around kind of the failures of our AI agent when it was being trained. And this person saw it and they were like, oh, wait, I have a contract from Barte in my inbox. And I actually want to do a benchmark about building this. So I'm just going to sign the contract now, make sure I don't owe anything that I've been delaying. And then I can call them and ask for a benchmark. And so it's this machine of luck of good things come to you when you start exposing what you're building, and they're not only necessarily on product.
Usually conversations that are rich have debate and two different opinions. The problem here is I actually have the same opinion and I like it. So I want to play devil's advocate and beat it up, but I actually like what you guys are doing. And I think a lot about this. I've actually thought about, what does a venture fund that is built in public look like? I would love your guys' opinions. If you were to advise me, and this is not a solicitation of capital for anyone listening, just for my lawyers, I'm going to be launching a third fund with the team here next year. What would you do if you were me, applying the principles you learned in company building?
Maybe the first context I'd give you is the way a founder would look at a venture fund being built and the unique things you bring to the table. I mean, you were a founder, you were an entrepreneur for so many years. And so you are able to see the two sides of this. And venture capital, there's a lot of groupthink. And so showcasing how you think about things and what you look into, and that you look into the fundamentals of company building, things like what you just asked. Okay, would you rather have started on slightly larger customers? We have a company that's built in public and has this forum, and so they have a struggle with prioritizing the roadmap through that, but it's still very good input. Showing that you're thinking deeply about these things will put you in a different category in the eyes of the founder, and most likely that flywheel helps with all sides of a fund, of building a fund, which is you have a very good community, you have a very good input, you are actually helpful, you are actually a great partner. And I think Latitud is already a very good start on that. Just to give you an example, when I was still in Portugal and we were starting Barte, you were starting cohort 1 or 2, and I got messages from 3 different people saying, hey, this is where all the guys are, where all the good guys in entrepreneurship are. You need to check out this fellowship. And so Latitud already started with that reputation. That with depth on how you think about things, that's a super differential. And that's the sign that you're building something that's going to last. And so that's going to move with the ecosystem as it grows for the next few decades. That would be my...
So let me recap a few things. Building a public for you guys has been hugely valuable from a recruiting standpoint, because people already know about you and they like understand your leadership style. They learn about the company because you kind of put out there what your lessons that you're going through. And so that kind of builds credibility and makes you an attractive place. It also helps that you're growing, right? If you're doing all those things, your business isn't growing, it's probably hard to get excited about you guys. But so it's combined. And I think it's interesting that you decided to start building a public once you found product market fit. I think that's like a smart, from a marketing strategy and a business strategy. It makes sense because, man, it's just so painful to be changing every day and all the, like, it'd be useful probably for other people, but from a business standpoint, it's like, you don't want to be celebrating the fact that you like don't know what you're doing, like for, an extended period of time until you actually figure it out. So I think that makes sense. Product, so customer feedback, product, acquiring new customers, I assume is also because it's a credibility. You land larger customers because it starts to see that you're like a real business. Yeah, these are all like pros. I mean, what's the negative? Like, is there any downside? Is it a lot of work? Is it does it require a lot of like effort?
It's a good question. I cannot truly say that I see a downside. I think it requires some time, and it's tricky to deal with positioning, especially when you're serving CFOs, when you helping people that are very afraid of the challenging business. So you always question yourself about how you looking like. But at the same time, I think it's larger differential when you're dealing with larger accounts, because everything thinks those guys are very rational, and they're not. Like they are like very smart, and they are analytical, and so but they people, like they don't want to only discuss the numbers. They want to connect with their partners and to talk about the like emotional roller coaster they were also crossing. So I think it's stressing because you walk all the time feeling that you're dealing with something trick, but at the same time, when you're doing this in an account-based market strategy, and we're talking about large negotiations with many stakeholders. They are very conservative. They are like putting their money in our hands. It's something that creates so much differential that the trade-off is clearly net positive, and I don't see a really downside. I think we have a specific profile of talent that are not attracted by our culture. So we very intense, we somewhat aggressive, but it's good. Like we're filtering to the right direction.
You want people to know what it's like because you don't want to get someone there and be like, oh, wow, this isn't for me. So the more you publicly expose that, the higher probability that they're going to like be a better cultural fit.
And even customers, like you bringing aligned customers. I think that's why our retention is so high. I think that's why we don't distract ourselves with the shining objects through the way. I think our growth has been very linear and fast because we basically could laser focus on what was genuine and what was truly aligned with our beliefs and our strategy.
But there's a point there. I mean, you asked about trade-offs or cons, and you mentioned focus, and Ralph also alluded to that. That's the main part. And that's why probably the 0 to 1, you shouldn't be that concerned about building in public, because there's more important things to do, and one of them is to understand if you have a product that the market actually wants, or what you need to iterate on until you get to that point. And so, more than celebrating everything we're doing right, when you're going from 0 to 1 and finding product market fit, which is when we didn't build in public, is probably not the moment where it pays off to spend any minute thinking about that. That concept is still true at this stage, which is, it is a positive flywheel. It is very useful. It is very helpful. It helps us think, iterate, hear opinions, gain credibility, do all of that. But it cannot be too extensive. And so one thing we do, and we almost do it subconsciously because it's natural for us now, is we do it in a very 80-20 fashion. So it's kind of good enough and it doesn't take away too much time. And if there's something more important in a given week or in a given month, then that's a month where building in public is going to lose a bit of intensity. And so as long as you know this is an exercise of consistency, but sometimes some other things will be more important for the business, that's the true trade-off you need to be mindful of.
Totally. And it should be very, very fast. Like you just sharing something that is already done inside your company. Exactly. Like it should take 5 minutes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we transition into chat about AI, what are the channels? How do you pick your channels to build in public? Is this TikTok thing? Is a LinkedIn thing? Does it matter? Are you cross channel? Tell me more about what's the most effective thing for you that you've found.
So we test and we see where we can have the most fun and have a relevant impact. So if it's something that's too much work and it's too uncertain, then it needs more structure into building into that. But if you look at our building in public formats, there's a lot of iterations and most of them are around, I'm curious to explore this. We've been doing a lot of text. Now we want to do text with a video. Now we want to do messages. We want to do images or graphs or shorter form, longer form. That sort of thing goes more around what can we do consistently and in this low effort manner so that we make sure this goes the long way versus what's going to give me a result in 1 week or 2 weeks. And so that's the main driver. Obviously, we're building this and both of us are very curious around things. And so that impetus to, maybe let's try and test this. Maybe let's see how this works. That's usually very big, but that's been the driver, I'd say. Do you agree with that?
Totally.
It's simpler and probably a lot less sexier than what one would expect, but that's the formula.
Let's talk about AI, because when Rafa and I had lunch in San Francisco, I know that you guys have been starting to use AI quite a bit. The company was kind of started. What year did the company get founded? Was it just 2.5 years ago?
Yeah, it was a bit more than that. So it was almost 4 years ago now.
Okay, so 2 years ago is when you really started breaking out. And
we launched it at the beginning of 2022.
So you started the company right during kind of the ChatGPT launch, more or less. around that. How have you used AI? How has it changed how you build? Give me the building in public version.
There's some interesting context there, which is before founding Barte, I was actually in an AI company called Tractable, which is a visual model company for accident recovery. So it's a real life or a real world use case of AI in visual models, which had a breakthrough a couple of years before. And so applying this in practice was something I was already living before starting Barte, which has a couple of advantages, not on the technical side, but mostly on being very pragmatic about AI. So AI is a fun tool and can be a very fun tool. But one thing that illustrates how we build with it is this useful? And is this useful for 100% of cases, for 30% of cases? How can we get the right inputs to train models, to calibrate models, and to understand how they can add value to our customers in a way that the platform shift would? So this is a tool, and our end is actually fixing how companies manage their cash, fixing how companies work. This is a tool that allows us to do that 100 times faster and with fewer people, fewer context losses. It's cheaper at scale, and so it makes a lot of sense to do that. What did we, or how did this illustrate that roadmap? One of the things we did, and we already mentioned, was card recovery. So there's a lot of transactions that are blocked within the payments ecosystem, and keeping it simple, they're not blocked in anti-fraud layers. They're blocked by whoever issued the credit card. This is something you cannot do systematically. You cannot fix this from the payments acceptance side, so from the acquirer side. What you can do is you can actually call a customer and say, hey, by the way, this was your bank blocking the transaction. You should call them, and once you call them, you can reprocess the transaction, and we can make this as simple as possible. Now, we can do this manually in the beginning. We did it manually in the beginning, and then eventually it evolved into an AI agent that calls the person, tells them what they need to do, forwards the call to the bank, and then eventually gives some time and reprocesses the transaction once we know the card is unlocked. This is all taking friction away from a process we know happens and we know is a process that should work normally. It has been blocked for a reason that's not realistic, and so we might as well take friction away from the process. Doing it with AI makes it a lot more scalable. That's just one example of how we've been using it.
Yeah, but it was funny how it started, because some months ago, even though we had almost 1 million buyers already, we started an internal competition to recover payments in a manual way, and in which we distribute, for example, iPhones for the team. And we started to track how much of the sales we could recover. And basically, we validated it was real, and it was like humanly impossible to the team to deal with the volume of buyers we had. And we built the first the first message agent, and then the first voice agent to compete with the team. And basically, he started to win because of response time, because of working on late night, on weekends, and so. And then we validated the A/B test, were clearly a win for the model. So that's the way it started, and we organically started to ask ourselves all of the points on the platform, and we could do something that was humanly impossible before. So it was like very pragmatical and very based on things we were like already testing manually.
What is your controversial take on AI? Is there something you believe that you think is not a mainstream thought in terms of its applicability to your business or in how it's going to change society? So I can leave it more broad or more specific.
I think it's not necessarily a concept, but the extent to which we look at AI in a very pragmatic way is probably the controversial thing. So we don't have that shiny object syndrome of, oh, look, this is now cool. We need to use it, and this is what we should do. Actually, more than the tests that go right, we had a lot of tests that did go wrong, and we killed them almost instantly. It's like, okay, we try this. It doesn't work. It's a waste of time for now. I mean, let's park it and let's leave it there. We have a business to build. And so maybe the I'm not sure how controversial that is, but the concept is whether there's AI or there's no AI, we need to do this and we need to do this at scale, faster, better, more effectively than any of the competitors we could find in the market. Now, that needs to be the guiding principle. AI is an amazing tool to do that, but it might just not be there yet for a couple of use cases. That's very pragmatic, a bit more pragmatic than getting carried through the wave of, oh, there's a platform shift, the world is going to end and it's going to change completely. And so let's change the whole company philosophy around this.
And I also think our first principle culture and the way we are 1% better every day on cracking the code of the real demand and what real solves the problem. It's much more valuable than people think when it comes to AI. It's a race in which this business acumen is so important, maybe the most important thing right now, like how to apply, how to be realistic on what's really generating value, and I think that's even something very interesting about how it can evolve in Latam, because I think that's the profile of our best entrepreneurs. Like we know how to deal with scarcity. We know how to be creative and to really understand what is the one thing that you need to do to solve the problem and to capture the demand. So I think people are very biased to the product side of the stuff, but it's not the most important.
It takes a few years to kind of get that product market fit. Like as an investor, I don't really care how long it takes to get to 1 million. I care how long it takes to get 1 to 10 to 20 to 30 to 40. So you're at 40 million. So you clearly found something. What does the business look like to get to 400 million? Like, what do you need to do to 10x the business? Is it more of the same, or is it you look for tangential opportunities? What does that look like? How do you envision that happening?
It's actually very tangible. So the interesting thing and what keeps us very excited about this is it's not an unreasonable number to think about 400, 1 billion, 2 billion, 10 billion. And that answers the question, which is we could go from 40 to 400 by doing nothing more than what we're doing now. That we can already see. That's obviously not the size of our ambition. And so what we want to do and what we are already doing and have spent a lot of our focus this year doing is the expansion into more verticals and in a more complete platform, solving the cash flow management problem for customers, that gets us to 10, 15 billion before leaving Brazil. And so there's an answer to 10xing the business. We can continue with our main businesses around accepting payments and around the things we've been doing on top of that. Being a full platform unlocks a business that's significantly larger than that. And so there's a lot of focus on tangential opportunities. What are the good news here? We can still grow fast while we take higher swings and while we take more aggressive bets towards how does this become a generational company. And so the one outcome that's very clear from that, and it's important, it's for us as founders, it's the more tangible this has become, the more committed we are on a longer time horizon. So it's not unreasonable to think both of us will be doing this for the next 20 or 30 years, because that's what we see the timeline will be to execute on this vision. And we see the opportunity in front of us. So this is probably the most interesting thing we could be doing within that time frame.
In your mind, to get to the next milestone, whatever the milestone is, doesn't matter the number, see a clear opportunity to build a generational business with billions in revenue. Because one of the hard things is when you're building a business, it's like, do you go wider, deeper? Do you focus on expanding your product portfolio? This is working. You still got a lot of running room to execute. So do you think in the next 2 to 3 years, will it be heads down execution continuous on what you're building? Or do you think you'll look for more tangential opportunities? Because those are different strategies. And how do you align with your stakeholders, your board, your investors?
Yeah, we don't depend on the tangential opportunities. The point is the product we have is enough to be like 100x bigger. The point is, um, we can create so much value in the market. There is no reason we don't um, create a much more complete product, because basically we serve business that don't have the energy and the focus to um, sophisticate their financial operations, and because of that they lose a lot of money. Once they have all the money flowing in Barte, you basically creating money for them, like reducing costs and increasing revenue in the automatic pilot. So basically we envision a market in which 5 or 10 years after today, it will be happening. Like they don't need to be a sophisticated financial team for having like their money operating by itself, and like reaching every single saving opportunity, every single transaction optimization opportunity. It's automatically. So basically, it's something that we can provide, and more it's possible. So why not to build that? So, but it's like it's not something we rely on for the next few years.
The great thing about building in public is you have to be authentic and honest, because otherwise you'll get called out because you're putting yourself out there, right? So let me ask you a question. How do you guys internally give me the building in public view of how do you discuss competition? There's some competitors in the space. It's an area with, heavy
We
funding.
don't, Brian.
You don't.
We
You
don't.
never
We
do.
don't. The only
Give
relevant.
me the real
the-
deal. You never think
No.
about anyone else.
We do about the incumbents, because the real competition. So, and there's a market element to that. So we serve mid to large companies, and there's a lot of innovation on payments for the long tail, for small companies. And if you think about payments in Brazil and about managing cash, all the innovation happened with you have these two massive companies. Then there was a third one, and they serve the full market. And then eventually you had a lot of innovation on longer tail and on serving small companies, because there's so many of them and they're also underserved that this is very obvious. Once you start going down that path, that is your path. We did something different. We talked to these companies and then we moved upstream. And then we started understanding who are our competitors. There's the three guys that have been there for longer than we've been adults. And so these are our competitors. And this is the real answer. These are the guys we look at internally. These are the guys our team looks at. And so there's not a lot of complexity around competitor landscape and how this needs to shape up. It's like the market is so big and so inefficient that we might as well just focus on this specific problem that we're fixing, then the next one, then the next one, and the next one. And if we do this, then we become as large as those incumbents. And so competition is coming from there, not from the tech ecosystem.
How do you rally your team around stuff? I mean, a lot of times, like, companies have different strategies. It's like, we're going to reshape an industry. We're going to, or like there's a common enemy that everyone has. Like, oh, we're going to kill this team. How do you create a driving factor so there's emotional buy-in inside your company?
This has changed over time and it's becoming more clear now, but it goes back to the beginning. So let me tell you, day zero, when we were knowing each other, the main frustration we had, and I think most professionals will have this at some point, is we had some bosses that we didn't really admire. We had some people around us that were working in an automated way. So, okay, I'm doing this because I should be doing this. I'm doing this because this is how it's done. And that's super frustrating. And so the rallying the team is more around, look, Barte doesn't work that way. We expect you to think and we expect you to know why you're doing what you're doing. And we expect you to do this very intensely and with very short cycles. These are relatively aggressive messages. And so it goes around the point that Rafa said, a lot of people don't fit at Barte. The point is the ones who do, they're very bought in with this style of working, because this is a style of working we found both of us have, and it didn't really fit any of the places we passed to before. And so it's very cultural. And it's interesting because Sure, we help companies manage cash, but the main differential with companies is how much of a partner we become to them. And so we start giving suggestions around the business, start asking the right questions. And that's the real impact if this becomes generational, which is we change the way in how the market works. And in the meantime, we build a team that is the example of how the market should work. And while we're doing that, to accelerate this process, we actually share a lot of our learnings on how we work and the controversial decisions and the mistakes we've made along the way. Because the impact is, look, we're finding a better way to work. What we're doing is almost irrelevant next to that. It's the way in which we're doing that. That has created a lot of cohesion and unity in the team so far.
Yeah, and a quick compliment here is um, everybody here loves to work with brilliant and reliable people. So it's fuel in which you can re-energize yourself and play an infinite game. The point is, this same fuel is the effect we want to create in the market, be your company related to ours or not. Like we truly believe there is a better way to work, and it's based on to think more deeply on what you work and being more first principle based. And we just want to create the biggest company possible to influence the market in that direction.
It's funny, Caetano, you said, that you didn't like the way some of your former bosses work. This is the challenging thing for a venture fund. If you call in new references to someone's former boss and they don't like them, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad. It's a no go on the investment, because sometimes employees can be rebels and then they become entrepreneurs. But so it's difficult. It's a pattern recognition.
Absolutely.
There. And then Rafa, to your point about, kind of the long-term, what is the long-term vision? If you were to extrapolate forward, you guys want to be like an ERP, you want to be what does this thing look like when it's, I don't want to say fully baked, because we're never fully baked, right? It's always a work in progress, but what is a mature Barte look like?
Well, it's a fully financial operating system for the companies, or a money operating system. And it not only means that all your money is automatized to identify the opportunity itself and to save money, increase revenue, increase margins, and whatever, but also that it start to create market effect, like as companies are transactions between each other and as the buyers are in our customer base, in our database, you start to be the rails of the market, but you reshape the rails, the financial rails of the market. So that's the long-term vision. At the same time, as I mentioned, that we want to influence how companies operate. We really think there is a better model to operate, and it's a long-term dream we have.
Awesome. Wrapping up here, my last question is: building a startup, is it a democracy or a dictatorship?
Democracy or a dictatorship? It's definitely not a democracy.
No,
so there's
not at all.
Not at all, not at all. There's decisions we will make, and there's decisions that will sit with us, and period. The one thing we have done always and continue to do is there's maybe a pool of small dictatorships around you. And so imagine you're building something very large, you need small independent ecosystems. And so the whole thing around thinking for yourself and making sure you ask the right questions and do and think about things deeply, that makes a difference in understanding. Even if I'm not involved in the decision, and even if Rafa is not involved in the decision, it will generally go along the right lines, and there's a credible hypothesis behind that. That is much more important than who decides. It's the way in which you came to the things you will test. That in itself is a concept we defined and imposed on the team, so it's very dictatorial of us. But that's how it should work.
Yeah, we have a value in our culture deck in which we say we are not the bosses. The mission is the boss, or the result is the boss. So what we're saying is, like, if you have a rational argument, and if this argument is coherent enough to question our point of views, say that, because we're not concerned about being right. We're concerned about take the best choice. So it's a dictatorship at the same time that it's like logic dictatorships. Like it's a first principle dictatorship. We're not the dictators. The logic is.
I was asked this question on a panel in China with another entrepreneur from Brazil and two Chinese entrepreneurs, and they loved asking me as the American this question. And my response was a benevolent dictatorship. And so, I think that you got to have, someone steering the ship and making the calls when needed. But, you're obviously listening to your team. And I think the way that I would encapsulate what you described is it sounds like at Barte, best ideas win.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
That's awesome, guys. Well, thank you for taking the time, for sharing, for building in public. I think it's, doing a service to other founders because, hey, it's a hard journey. And if you can learn from other entrepreneurs that are, in the thick of it and, exposing some of the ideas along the way, hopefully we can, all learn something and get better. And so I think it's the right spirit, and it sounds like it's serving the business as well. So congratulations.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having us.